Hey Arks, have you ever wondered how status elements or effects work against you? Or even what the resistance stats do for it? Well, today I'm going to explain the details about each of those. Try to bear with me though, as this does involve a bit of math. First, we need to define what resistance actually is. Resistance is the stat that determines your threshold for getting a certain status ailment. It actually isn't RNG based, and it doesn't do anything like shorten the duration. There are 7 of these resistance stats that are calculated separately based on different negatives and positives for each, using augments or armor. Calculation for these, though, isn't actually too hard. It's resistance equals parentheses 1 minus accumulation factor times 100. What even is accumulation factor, though? Accumulation factor is the raw number a piece of gear is giving you, and is the actual multiplier that determines when you get affected by status effects. For example, 1 giant armor reduces resistance by 50%. So let's plug this into the formula. Minus 50 is the resistance equals parentheses 1 minus accumulation factor times 100. So to start off with this, to figure out accumulation factor, we're going to divide each side by 100. That makes the resistance negative 0.5, or negative 1/2, equals 1 minus accumulation factor. So we're going to minus the 1 on each side, making it negative 1.5 equals negative accumulation factor. So we're just going to drop the negatives here. So accumulation factor equals 1.5. So you may be thinking that, so if I had 2 giants on, there would be minus 100%, right? With a factor of 2. Well, in game it shows negative 125% resistance. Yeah, the accumulation factor is actually multiplicative instead of additive. So instead of this, it actually looks like this. So just to reiterate why accumulation factor is so important, it is the multiplier against being affected by the status ailments. Here's a rough chart showing this in the works from the Arks Visiphone website. As you can see, here is the resistance and accumulation factor that we figured out earlier. Then there are 3 new columns. Number of hits until occurrence, low, medium, and high. So these are actually for different enemy attacks that accumulate more to your status effect threshold. An example Visiphone gives is that enemies in Alio, up here, are constant. So like next Alio's moves are just like the one bird's moves that tries to put the light effect on you. So if 4 hits are taken with 0 resistance, so 0 resistance down here, the status effect will occur, with low accumulation. So all those hits are gonna be low hits. So each of these have different values. So an example or an assumption that they give for the low value is 100. And that our threshold is estimated to be a constant around 330. So you get hit once, you have 100. You hit twice, 200. 3 times 300, and that's still not enough to break your threshold. So that's why on the 4th hit, it actually surpasses that number, and that's when you get hit by the status effect. That's if you had nothing affecting your resistance. Let's go back to our example of when we had 2 giants on with a negative 125% resistance. So this has an accumulation factor of 2.25. So these hits are still hitting for 100, but then they're multiplied by 2.25. So each of these hits are actually hitting for 225 value against your threshold. So that's why it only takes 2 hits when you have giants on. So you get 225, and then you're at 450 on the second hit. So that surpasses your threshold. So with these other types of hits, they work exactly the same. They just have a higher base value. So with resistance of 0 here, it takes 3 hits, but when your resistance goes down, you're gonna only take 1 hit eventually from the 2 giant thing instead of 3 if you didn't have them on. And then with certain attacks, no matter what resistance you really have, you're going to be affected by that status effect if you're hit. So hopefully you understand how the accumulation factor and the accumulation value and threshold kind of work here. Let's move on to the status effects of the different types. So first we have burn. As you may notice here, there's multiple levels of burn, but it's not like the enemies are giving you actual different burns, like, you know, next gives you like 2, or like those little lizards give you 1 or anything like that. It's actually all the same. So up here it states, if the same effect overlaps, the level of it will increase by 1 up to 5 levels. What it means is that, going back up here to this chart, say you're getting hit by the burn status, and you have the 2 units on. If you get hit twice, you get the burn effect. But if you get hit another 2 times with the same like fire attacks, you actually accumulate level 2, and another 2 attacks level 3, and so on. So these kind of like stack, so it's 21 seconds when the first level is granted. But every time this overlaps, it adds 2 seconds to the time, up to a maximum of 31 seconds added. So each of these levels is actually worse and worse. So the damage taken, which most of you already know about from the burn, you know, it increases as the levels go up. But some of you who may not know, your attack actually decreases too. How much damage you're actually dealing to enemies. You can actually not get rid of this status effect. There's no way to dispel it, as it says here. Not even going underwater dispels the effect. So once you're burning, you're getting burned. But moving on from that status effect, we're going to go to freeze, which also has 5 levels. So this is where you get frozen and you just can't do anything. There's nothing you can do. You're just going to sit there and get hit. So at first it gives you 7 seconds, but every time you gain a level, 5 seconds is added, with a maximum of 7 seconds added to the maximum. So you can actually keep getting hit by frozen and stay frozen for quite some time. So later on, and like with the ice zone that might be coming soon, this frozen status effect could be really dangerous. Moving on to the shock status effect. This is caused by the lightning elemental attack, of course. This is where you become electrified and you start like staggering or getting knocked down. This one is also a little bit annoying / interesting. So based on the levels is how often you do the flinch. So level 1 is 6, and then these 2 and 3 is 5, and then it gets, you know, all the way down to 4. So every 4 seconds you'll start flinching, but there's also an increasing chance of you getting just straight up knocked down instead of flinching. So, you know, instead of going like, ugh, you're gonna like actually fall down and get knocked down. But you know, each time the level, you know, overlaps, you get plus 6 seconds on there, up to, you know, 20-second maximum. But there's also certain things that you can do that prevent the knockback and flinching, as I've also found myself. So like the braver combat, when you're doing the iframes with that, or when you're doing the knockdown skill from Hunter, or just other PAs that have like certain iframes, you can avoid this flinch if you do it at the right time. Moving on to blind, which is caused by wind. This one just increases your PP consumption, so it requires more of your like mana or photon power. So each level increases the consumption all the way up to 30% more. But yeah, each time it overlaps, it adds more time, 7 seconds, up to a 35-second maximum. Pretty easy, nothing too crazy about it. So up next is panic, which is caused by light attacks. This one is rather interesting. Once you get hit by this, your inputs for your movement will all get changed one by one. So with increasing level, the change intervals like keep changing. So like faster and faster, your movements will just get randomly determined. So it lasts actually a pretty long time compared to the rest of them, 30 seconds. And then every time it overlaps, it adds 5 seconds with a plus 40-second maximum. And then with the dark element attack is poison. This also just gradually takes your HP. It kind of works like burn, but just instead of any, attack down, it's just straight max HP. So this actually takes more, up to 5% at level 5. And it occurs every 3 seconds instead of 2 seconds like burn. So, last 25 seconds and then adds 7 seconds when overlapping or increasing level. And then it can add up to 31 seconds maximum. So then finally there's the physical status effects. The only one currently in the game is stun. This one says like you're incapacitated, but what that actually means is just like you have like these little stars above your head and you're like kind of like going around a circle and can't really do anything. But yeah, this last 6 seconds when it's given to you, it can actually overlap, which I haven't seen because, as it describes here, when you receive a stun attack during the effect, the cancel will be prioritized, which that means, can be canceled by being attacked. So if you're attacked while you're stunned, it just gets rid of the stun. So I don't know how increasing levels work, but the effect duration can be shortened by rotating your directional input. So like, up, left, down, right, like that kind of thing. So you can actually shorten it to, just like a couple seconds or something like that. So I said this is the only physical status effect currently in the game, as that is true. But when you look at the icon in the resistance or like the character menu, it's actually split in half. There's another icon there other than stun. That's actually known as injury, which was actually in base PSO2 game. What injured or injury does is reduces your max HP for a limited time. So each time, this stacks, it reduces your max HP even further and further. But who knows when we'll see that status effect. Alright, that was quite a lot of information. But hopefully you guys got plenty of insight on how resistances and status ailments work in New Genesis. If you learned something new, just please consider liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.